Most people are dumb with money. And if you're watching this video, I hope that you aren't. But if you are, hopefully this will shed some light on what people do that causes them great financial distress and prevents them from being able to escape jobs that they hate. So let's get started. First of all, financial literacy is very important, yet the school system does not teach it. Why? This is intentional. And I've realized fairly recently that the reason school system doesn't teach financial education to students is because the government and the institutions don't really want people to be free. Because you see, in order for our economy to operate successfully, we need workers. And so if everyone was rich, they wouldn't have to work. So financial literacy is one of the biggest reasons why most people are struggling financially and do so into their later adult years, their 50s, 60s, and onwards. So aside from financial literacy, another big reason that most people are broke and are dumb with money is because they simply aren't able to delay gratification. So they over leverage themselves. They purchase a lot of consumer products and they really focus on buying things that aren't actually needed, or they're over leveraging themselves. For example, most people want to buy a house. At least here where I live in Canada, housing is a big thing. Obviously, we all need a place to live, but buying a house has always been associated with success and with, the American dream. So nowadays, housing prices, at least where I live, are very, very high. We're talking upwards of $700,000 to $1 million for a nice house in a decent area. Not even in Toronto. We're talking Milton, Guelph, Kitchener-Waterloo, even in smaller towns now like Stratford, Tillsonburg. And because salaries and wages haven't really kept up with inflation, especially the growth in the housing market, people are now getting in more and more debt. And not just, in 2026, but, specifically kind of after 2017, especially throughout COVID, people have been paying way over, what I believe housing should be worth. And in order to secure these properties, in order to buy these houses, most people don't have, several $100,000 available to buy a house with, a low amount of debt. So they end up getting themselves in a huge amount of debt, right? They take out the $500,000 mortgage, the $800,000 mortgage, and while technically they may be able to make their payments, these people are going to be house poor. In other words, a large percentage of their income, their net pay, is going towards financing their property. And this isn't even including maintenance costs, taxes, property taxes, insurance, utilities, all these other additional expenses that many don't even consider. And so a lot of people today just have very short-term mindsets. They want what their parents had, what they see other people in society have, and that is the house, the new car. And most people aren't willing to invest and build their wealth first before purchasing these assets. They're technically assets, but if you think about it, I think a house should be considered a consumer good, consumer product, because it's not putting money in your pocket. Yes, you may get that appreciation, as we've seen with the housing market, over the past couple decades. But at the end of the day, it's, you can't go buy groceries with your home value, right? It's just a number until you actually sell the property. And once you sell it, you've got to find another place to live, whether that's renting or purchasing another property. So I like to look at housing as a luxury item. Sorry, not housing, but purchasing a home, because obviously you need a place to live. You're not going to go live on the streets, especially in Canada. It's freaking cold here. Anyway, where was I? Yes. people are getting in a load of debt to purchase homes because they want it now. They don't want to wait until they're more financially secure, until their debt ratios are better. Basically as soon as people get a decent paying job, maybe they're in a relationship, they get married. Okay, time to buy the house because that's what success looks like. That's what I want. So I'm going to take out debt to do that, and I'm going to struggle to make my payments because that's what success is. So people have a very short-term mindset. They don't think about the long-term consequences of their actions. And so I think if people were to look down the road and say, well, okay, if I make this purchase, if I buy this home, if I buy this new car, how is this going to affect my finances? Because whether you care about money or not, I'm guessing you do if you're watching this video, but at the end of the day, it's important, right? Especially in this current world, in this current society, we need money to purchase items that we need to live. And so I think more people need to focus on their finances and getting their money right before diving into massive life-changing purchases that can really change the trajectory of your life. So I'm gonna drink some coffee because it's just in my hand and it's hot, but this coffee was free, by the way, provided by this apartment that I'm currently in. So I'm not saying you should avoid the coffees, right? I'm not saying you need to slash your expenses so hardcore that you just, you've completely choked out your life. But when you're making big decisions like housing, that's where your analysis and whatever you choose to do can really tip the scales of your life and of your finances. Take it seriously. It's not something to be taken lightly. There are many benefits to home ownership, to having a good car that's reliable, and to making these larger purchases. But at the end of the day, you have to weigh the pros and cons and ask yourself if you're in a situation that is conducive to taking these items on without putting yourself in a precarious spot, where a job loss could force you to default on mortgage payments, or anything could happen in your life that could potentially make these decisions detrimental. So I would always factor in these different consequences. Ask yourself, if this happens, what am I going to do? Am I going to be able to make the payments? Do I have 6 to 12 months of cash savings, of living expenses saved in an emergency fund, so that I'm not going to be sunk by certain larger expenses that aren't expected? Because life is unpredictable, and so you always have to factor in some level of buffer into your finances. So financial education, I would say, is the biggest thing. Most people do not teach themselves about money, and the fact that you're watching this video tells me that you are interested in learning about your finances and how you can leverage that to live the life that you want to live. And the second thing is that people they overexert themselves. They put too much stake in their current wants, and they don't balance that against the future consequences of their actions. And so most people don't really set themselves up for success when it comes to money. That's why you see people who are in their 60s still working. They can't retire. They don't have the asset base to support their lifestyle, especially today when costs of living are rising, and pensions that used to be very common are no longer commonplace. So now the onus is really on people like you to set yourself up for financial success. You can't rely on the government. You can't rely on your employer to pay out in retirement. I think anyone who does that, especially in today's uncertain economy, is putting themselves into too much risk. I didn't word that well, but yes, this coffee is pretty good. So, if you learn about money, if you make, big life-changing purchases like home ownership without over leveraging yourselves, and you have a good asset base behind you, and also if you invest for the long term, instead of just buying consumer goods with your earnings, you instead reinvest that, whether that be back into your business, into the stock market, into real estate. You have to have that long-term growth mindset, because wealth is a long game. Yeah, we all see the people on Instagram who drive Lambos and have mansions and live these glamorous lifestyles on beaches, traveling the world. It's always in our face. But a lot of that is smoke and mirrors. True wealth is built over time. It's built strategically, and it's maintained through consistent efforts and through not wasting money, through putting money into situations that will allow it to grow and to compound over years, over decades. So I think that's where I'm going to end today's video. Most people are done with money, but you don't have to be one of them. And I want to thank you for tuning in today. Grab yourself a coffee and start getting I don't know what I was going to say. This is embarrassing. Well, perfect place to end the video. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and subscribe. See you in the next one.